Oh. That's weird. Is Patty staying?
Got involved in the show.
Whoa, welcome.
Or was it?
You guys don't have Patty on these tours, do you?
Okay.
Thank you.
Somebody did. There we go.
All right. I will check the building department and see what they can do about the front door situation, but I don't have a way of fixing that.
Should we put the chairs? No, it's a public meeting. I think we should do that.
Sure. It was not locked. When I
There's a hanger, what about the hangers?
it was locked, did you lock it? But just to see everybody else. Yeah, that's great.
I will see, please, what someone can do, but
Okay. Welcome, everyone, to this August 27th meeting of the Zero Emissions Advisory Board. We'll go around and say who's here. That part of our process, just, yeah, it is, and we're always going to hear it.
I think you just say who's remote.
Bill Hyman, okay, and we have remotely, we have Kathleen Scanlon and Alan Leviton.
Hello?
Hello there. Anyway, welcome. So we want to go through the approval for the July 23rd meeting minutes. Anyone have any comments, concerns, changes that they wanted to go over? I'll make a motion to approve. Second.
Second?
Okay, all in favor, Werner?
can I get a
Yes.
confirmation on who seconded?
I think we're in first.
Werner? Yes. Bill? Yes. Patty?
Yes.
Alan?
Yes.
Kathleen?
Yes.
Yes. I just went to the Preservation Commission meeting and their chair called out the people in order. And I was like, well, that's much better than the random way that I do it normally. So anyway. Great. Next up, I think I'm going to hand this over to, any public comment? It's not on the agenda, but we should be looking for.
It is on the agenda.
It is. Great, public comment. Anyone in the public here who wants to comment?
Currently have one member of the public in the room and we have 5 online and no one is indicating that they have a comment at this time.
Welcome everyone online. Welcome to member of the public in the room. Great, let's move on to the presentation and discussion of climate action and resiliency plan draft goals, strategies and prioritization framework. I'm gonna hand it over to Alexandra.
Great. All right. Good evening, everyone. I'm Alexandra Vecchio. I'm the Director of Sustainability and Natural Resources for the town of Brookline. This evening, I have joining me our project manager from our consultant firm, Blue Strike Environmental, and that is Rich Swanson, who is on Zoom. Rich is currently in North Carolina. We had a little bit of a scheduling change on our end, and so he was able to still accommodate us and appreciate that very much. So just want to start off by thanking all the members of the public, both online and that are here this evening, and also those who have participated all along the way in this development for the Climate Action Resiliency Plan. So tonight's presentation, I'll probably say this about 10 times, repetition is the key to learning. Tonight's presentation is very preliminary, and it's really a discussion around the draft goals and strategies in the Climate Action Resiliency Plan. You'll hear me refer to it as the CARP. And thinking about how those items in the plan will be prioritized. So we have a lot of content to get through tonight, so we'll keep our presentation pretty high level so that we have time for discussion and feedback. Our two goals for tonight's conversation are really getting input on the draft goals and strategies, and then receiving input on the prioritization framework. So we will first start off with reviewing our greenhouse gas emissions inventory, give a high level recap of the public outreach process that we conducted as part of this plan, talk about the different categories that the CARP will focus on, and give an overview and structure to the plan itself. We will then talk about the goals and strategies and a few action items, and I'll explain what each of those terms means, and then we will talk about the prioritization criteria. So for those of you who might be tuning in for the first time or just joining us for the first time as we develop the Climate Action Resiliency Plan, the project started the end of 2024, the beginning of 25 with a baseline assessment period. And that includes looking at our current climate goals, our current climate action plan, which was developed in 2018, as well as other programs and policies and planning tools that the town has committed to over the last several years. And then starting in the spring in March, we spent about the past 5 months doing a lot of public engagement, so gathering input for the plan itself. And now we're at the very beginning of this strategy and finalization of the plan process. So you're seeing the first attempt at starting to pull together those 5 months of feedback. Here you're just seeing a list of the various policies and plans that were reviewed. This actually isn't even all of them in totality. Brookline has a lot of them, but all of these played a role in the development of the plan. And obviously starting with, as I mentioned, the existing climate action plan, including everything from our urban forestry plan, transportation mobility plan, open space plans, hazard mitigation plans, electrification study reports, zero waste framework, etc. So I think the focus for this plan is that we really want to build off of the great work and goals that Brookline has already set. But we really want this to be a very actionable plan, to be a very focused plan, and to be ambitious but realistic, which is a fine balancing act for sure. So a quick recap, just to orient everyone, or possibly if you're tuning in for the first time, this is the greenhouse gas inventory that was conducted by Blue Strike at the start of that baseline data gathering portion for the plan. So on the left, you'll see emissions that are associated with the community. So that's residents, business, property owners. As you can see, the vast majority of our emissions come from natural gas at 39%, and then the transportation sector, 31%. And electricity at 23%. We also have some emissions associated with solid waste and wastewater as well. And then on the right, you'll see emissions that are associated with municipal operations. So this is the town's emissions, and the majority of those are associated with our buildings and our facilities at 41%. The emissions of employees commuting into work in Brookline are 35%, and about 17% are associated with our fleet. So both our gas operated vehicles and diesel, and then about 6% from our streetlights. So that really shows, the greenhouse gas inventory really did a baseline assessment for us as it relates to our climate mitigation actions. So those associated with, emissions reduction, but it doesn't necessarily look at climate adaptation. So this plan does include components of both. The focus of ZEAB is obviously on mitigation, but we use the hazard mitigation plan as our primary source for Brookline for adaptation actions, and then obviously input from the community over the course of those 5 months as well. So this is a summary of our engagement activities. There's a lot that we could go into here, but for the sake of focusing on the content this evening, I'll just say that we held 2 public forums over the spring and early summer. The first one focused on prioritization criteria and some initial solutions to the climate crisis. And then we refined those solutions and actions, asked people for input on programs, policies, and different efforts to educate and engage the public. And then we also completed a townwide survey, which had just over 500 responses, where we asked people about their concerns and also asked them to rank their solutions. Blue Strike also conducted interviews with staff from almost all departments in town that touch any part of the Climate Action Resiliency Plan, and then also had interviews with members of ZIAB, as well as public meetings with ZIAB as well. In our public forums, we asked people for input on these different climate action categories. So since ZIAB's focus is on emissions reduction, I'm just highlighting two here from the public forum, one on buildings and energy and one on sustainable transportation and mobility. Just want to clarify that these are, this is input that we heard from the community. This does not necessarily mean that these are the most impactful or the most prioritized or most important strategies, but these are the ones that we heard about the most. So as it relates to buildings and energy, it was solar panels for municipal buildings and a town program for the bulk purchase of heat pumps. And then for sustainable transportation and mobility, it was focused on bike infrastructure and EV charging, particularly for those who can't install EV charging at their homes themselves, so likely renters or people in multi-family houses. Similarly, in the survey, we heard a lot of different strategies, and those were categorized in a similar system to what you heard about in the public forums. So looking at municipal buildings and energy, the top strategy that we heard about was installing solar panel on municipal roofs. For the community-wide, so looking at private buildings, private residents, it was developing an opt-out community solar program. And related to sustainable transportation, it was to improve walking routes in high-density areas to make that a more appropriate action for people to take. Resource conservation was focused on policies that promote the salvage and reuse of building materials, and natural systems and resilience prioritize tree planting in neighborhoods that are most susceptible to heat. So this evening, we are going through our draft goals and strategies, and you'll see that those are divided into 5 categories. So before we jump into those, I think it's just helpful for everyone to see a definition of what we mean by the categories. Some of them I think are self-explanatory, but some might have a little bit of an interpretation to them. So buildings and energy really focus on how the buildings are constructed, powered, and operated. Resource conservation and management is a focus on reducing consumption and waste across systems. Sustainable transportation and mobility really focuses on how people move through Brookline. Natural systems and community well-being focuses on environmental quality, ecological systems, and public health. And resilience, adaptation, and risk reduction focuses on preparing for and reducing harm from climate-related hazards. I will note this is not a sustainability plan. We are the Division of Sustainability and Natural Resources, but that is not what this plan is. This is not even our only strategic plan that we build out for our work. So this is a climate action resiliency plan. So the goals that are reflected in here are focused on greenhouse gas reductions and building resilience to the impacts of climate change. And that is very intentional. So that doesn't mean that some other work that relates to our environment or ecological protection isn't important. It's just not reflected in this document. It also doesn't mean that work isn't going to happen. Our division recently spent a great deal of time developing our next open space plan. That has a much larger focus on ecology, wildlife, biodiversity. So all that to say, this plan, in order to keep it focused, action, but ambitious, actionable but ambitious, we really want to make sure that we're focusing on strategies that are directly reducing our impacts from climate change. So tonight you will hear us use these terms repeatedly. You already have, in my case, a few times. So I just wanted to also share some definitions to help orient folks. So this is a 10-year plan with the intention of us doing a progress check and possible update at the 5-year mark. So it really has a high-level target that's aligned with that the town has set at this point, which is reducing Brookline's emissions to reach net zero by 2040. Tonight, for our conversation, we'll really focus on the goal and strategy level. And I almost think of these as kind of nesting dolls building on one another. So our goals are really the big picture targets. These are sector-specific emissions. Since this is such an early draft, you'll see that most of our goals don't have quantitative metrics in them yet. That's on purpose. We haven't forgotten them. That analysis is just still being done by Blue Stripe to figure out what is both ambitious and realistic. Then within those goals, you'll see that there are often multiple strategies reflected. And those are the high level steps that allow us to achieve those goals. And I'm sure in many cases, when you see the strategies, you might think, well, that's vague. How are we going to do that? That leads to the action steps. So the action steps are much more discrete activities that really support that strategy. And that strategy then supports that larger goal. So the action steps provide nuanced steps on what we'll do to make the necessary progress. For tonight, we're primarily focusing at the goal and strategy level, but we do have a couple strategies that we included some action items in just so that you can get a flavor of what action items look like. And then, of course, as the goals and strategies are further refined over the next several weeks, we'll be developing out more of those action items at that point. So with that, I will turn things over to Rich, our project manager, and ask him to go through the draft goals, strategies, and prioritization framework.
Yeah, great. Thanks so much, Alexandra. So as Alexandra mentioned, most of what remains here in this presentation is about goals and strategies, but I wanted to show you a little bit of an example or a categorization of what you're going to see on the following slide. So Alexandra oriented us to the categories that we have, those 5 categories, and so you'll see those in titles on the following slides. Then you'll see goals. And so each category has 2 or 3 specific goals. Each of the goals is supported by another 2 or 3 or 4 strategies. And then each strategy is supported by or will be supported by a series of action steps. All strategies will have multiple actions associated with them, but given how early we are in the drafting process, we've chosen one strategy from the buildings and energy category and one strategy from sustainable transportation and mobility strategy to include sample or draft action items so you can see how those sort of build out. With that.
Just a sec.
Yeah.
Thank you. Sorry. We were trying to grab you before you took off. We have a hand raised in the room, so I just want to address that.
Sorry about that. Yeah, sorry.
Thanks, Rich. It's Bill, and I just have a process question, which is, would you like us to be responding as you go, slide by slide? Do you want to have us accumulate questions and address them at the end of a certain section? How do you want to proceed within this discussion?
Yeah, I will leave that to Rich. Rich, do you want to go do it by section, or do you want to do all questions and comments at the end?
I think what we'll do is we'll go through each category, which will be about 3 or 4 slides, and then we'll pause and see what questions or comments there are, and then move on from there. If we feel like we're getting too far ahead of ourselves, then we might change that and just finish out the rest in case people have questions, about things that are going to be covered but haven't been yet. So we'll go with Plan A first, and then if we need to, we can always switch to Plan B.
Can I ask a preliminary question?
Sure.
That's going to help me understand what you're going to say?
Yeah.
So, we've been talking about the prioritization framework, and in the last couple of meetings, we've kind of talked about some of the challenges with some of the multipliers and some of the kind of the details. Is this presentation that you're about to give us on strategies and goals something that what kind of data underlies it, given that kind of we've been talking amongst ourselves about how to apply what does this come out of? What does the next few slides on buildings and energy come out of in terms of analysis on your part?
Yeah. So that's a great question. So what's come out what's driven these things are, input from you all, input from the community, the other programs, policies, plans, et cetera, that Brookline has produced that are relevant, where there's a sort of a Venn diagram crossover, and then some best practices, from other communities. The prioritization exercise will come once we have, more or less derived the strategies, and then we will prioritize those strategies according to the metrics that you all have been working on. And so we will get to that prioritization process. And we have replicated essentially the ZAB prioritization, not only framework. We haven't totally replicated it, so there's a few differences, but we can show you what that is here at the end.
Can I just test that a little bit with one example here to better? So bullet 2 is develop a bylaw on communication about energy performance information. Is that, why is that there? Is that there because it is a known strategy by Blue Stripe that's effective at carbon reduction? Is it readily implemented without much additional staff? Why is that there in the universe?
Yeah, that's a great question. So it's there because we believe it would be very effective. It hasn't been prioritized in time or sequentially. That's where the prioritization framework will, sort of most strongly come into play, is we'll take those low-hanging fruit pieces with high impact, all the different criteria that you all have been talking about. But for example, that second bullet, there is research on this type of bylaws, and the preliminary research. I think it was done in the city of Austin, Texas, and a couple of other places, and then kind of replicated a little bit larger by a DOE study. I'm having trouble remembering exactly, but I do have a footnote to it. So this particular one is coming from some research, and also because it has been suggested, by several folks in terms of our public outreach and so forth.
Okay, thanks. That's helpful. This is an illustration. That was helpful. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, great. Yeah, any other questions along those lines, sort of process questions before we dive in?
Well, I just want to make sure that Patty's question and concern is addressed. Do you feel like that was not the answer that was?
I infer that there's going to be an answer along those lines for each of these things, or some thought behind each one and a reason for it. And I don't need to know right now what the entire thinking is. I just wanted to test a little bit. Thank you.
Yeah, no, for sure. It's a great question. So there's research behind it, which we feel like will support the actual strategy or action item. And then the prioritization piece helps us organize them relative to one another.
Okay, thank you. That helps.
Okay, so for buildings and energy, we have a first goal here, which just says reduce emissions from residential and commercial buildings by some percentage, by some date, through increased energy efficiency and decarbonization. As Alexandra mentioned, the percentage and date are still being determined. Since this is a 10-year plan, we may end up seeing a lot of those dates that are sort of 10 years out, or 5 years and 5 years with, sort of an interim target. The percentages will be driven largely by, by what would be sort of feasible, but also aggressive and, within the realm of possibility for Brookline moving forward, and also keeping in mind that trajectory of net zero by 2040. So that's another driving factor, I think, behind both the timeline and the percentage of reduction. And you'll see that, so I take a little bit longer to explain that here. You'll see that a few times throughout the presentation. As one of the strategies to support that goal, we are recommending here in this preliminary draft, removing barriers and incentivizing energy efficiency and decarbonization investments in existing residential and commercial buildings. So to support that particular strategy, there are a number of action steps, and there are actually 3 here and then 3 on the next slide. The first is to expand and promote the Mass Save Energy Audit and Efficiency Program, sort of uplifting those in the public conscience, meeting annual goals as detailed in the 2025 Community First Partnership Grant. And then there are some examples there. Then the second one is to develop a bylaw requiring that all residents in commercial property sales and leases include standardized energy performance information. As was mentioned, the third one says accelerate the adoption of heat pumps in private buildings through a town-supported bulk purchasing. Again, you saw that in the public comments. And Rebecca, if you move to the next slide, the goal and strategy have simply been repeated here, and so there are 3 additional action steps. One of them is to pilot an interdepartmental monthly office hours where representatives from town departments can be available to answer questions from contractors and homeowners about the actual, sort of construction components and integration of this type of equipment. Fifth is promoting participation in a PACE program, Property Asset Assessed Clean Energy Program, which can offer low-cost, long-term financing on these components and have those be tied to the property. And then sixth, and finally, to coordinate with utilities and advocate for a modern grid that can meet the electrification goals and needs of Brookline. This one was suggested, this particular action step was suggested by staff, who is a little bit concerned about an aggressive push towards electrification and just making sure that we're working with the relevant utilities and authorities to ensure that there's adequate capacity for that extra load. So because this is, sort of a fully discussed goal, strategy, and action, maybe I'll just pause here. The rest of them won't look quite like this because we won't build out the action steps, but I thought I'd just pause here and see if you had any questions about this particular strategy or the way that this is being structured or presented here today. Yeah, Kathleen.
Hi, thanks, Rich. So thank you very much for the presentation. And I just want to understand a little bit about what we're seeing here. So when I look at the last bullet point under the strategy, the coordinate with utilities and advocate for a modern grid, like to me, that's really crucial. And as a town, we need to get ahead of this shaky grid objection, which prevents a lot of progress. For instance, if the grid can't handle the transition, why not? Where can municipal pressure be applied? And how in our CARB will coordinate with and advocate for actually be defined? And I'm wondering, how will that be flushed? How will those concerns be flushed out going forward, or will they?
Yeah, that's a good question. So, I guess what I hear you saying is maybe twofold. One is, does this need to be sort of uplifted to a higher level so that there is, so that this type of conversation, to ensure kind of grid resiliency and robustness is taking its right ordinal place in the order of things, to eliminate some of the concern that people might have about what, I liked your term shaky grid. So it sounds like that's one component. And then the second component is, what specifically might the town of Brookline do to advocate in this direction? What action steps can they take? So to the first question, we can certainly uplift this, and I think that makes sense. That's a great comment. To the second one, certainly, I know Brookline is working with the state. The state is also working with local utilities.
Yes.
To, sort of strengthen legislation, to strengthen regulation, and so on and so forth. apart from that, you know, we haven't developed out anything else beyond sort of this advocate part, largely because I guess we're hoping that the state is, you know, is working in that direction at the same time. But if you have specific ideas or somebody else has specific ideas about how best to sort of press that advocacy, it would be great to include them, you know, here.
Yeah, I actually do, because there was a webinar like back in May, and then another one in July, inviting municipalities to strategize over that. And so improving that grid interconnection is a whole focus of the EEA. And there's an advisory council that's working with municipalities. So that's what I was wondering, if it's going to get into that kind of granular detail where staff would be starting to get involved with those kind of initiatives, if we have it listed here, and if we will be kind of specifying that level. I can't remember, it's something like a modernization grid.
Yeah, it's the GMAC. I'm familiar with it, Kathleen.
Yeah, right, exactly. So like, are we going to be, you know, doing things like that in response to this kind of, you know, strategy? I'm just curious, how detailed are we getting here?
Yeah, so I think in this case, you're kind of, to your first point, you know, lifting that as that coordination with utilities to a strategy level, and then getting specific with the action steps that go into that would be helpful for something that's more that is more a strategy as opposed to an action. Right here, you see it reflected as an action item.
Yeah.
To achieve that larger strategy of removing barriers, but it in itself, it can be a strategy, and then associated actions will follow through with that, and that would be quite detailed. The actions you're seeing here aren't even a complete set of actions; they're just some examples.
Yeah, right.
So the action steps will be quite finite to be able to achieve any one of those strategies. So that would be broken down further.
Okay, I think that's a great idea, just because it seems that no matter what board I'm in front of or what we're talking about, that is the first question out of people's mouths. The grid can't handle it. And then you have to go through and walk them through what's being done about it and what can be done about it. And I just want to make sure Brookline's part of that conversation as a municipal leader.
Yeah.
Michael,
Sorry.
Were you going to talk to the GMAC
Yeah.
issue specifically? Why didn't you do that first? Because I was going to do something.
Okay, yeah, I also have something else on this slide. But so Kathleen, there, I put my notes from the July GMAC stakeholders meeting in materials. It's for a later agenda.
Okay.
item. It relates exactly to this. There's some bold underlining text in my notes from that meeting.
Yeah.
Some of the points that came up at the meeting about ideas. The other thing I'd mention, Rich, is that the Boston first draft cap that was just released has a whole section on exactly this. And the way Boston organized their cap is, you know, categories of items under continue doing, another category, start doing, and a third category, consider evaluating to do. And so it has a bunch of stuff on this under to start in the next 5 years. And that would be worth looking at. And if there's any volunteer support that would be beneficial on the part of Zia, a Zia member on this point, I'd be happy to raise my hand and help.
Yeah, that's great. Is that, so that's just been released for public comment? Is that right? Or you said draft cap?
Yeah, just released like last week.
Okay, yeah, terrific. And Kathleen, great suggestion. So that's super helpful. Taking an action step and sort of moving it up to the strategy level, you know, so that we can dive into more specific details if you're observing becoming stuck in some of those areas. Yeah, super helpful.
Okay,
I think
thank
there's
you.
some online questions too.
Before we move on, Rich, just to I think what we discussed here was moving this particular item up to being a strategy. I would note that I think that the way it's presented here, I might categorize it as a dependency for this goal. So it's for this strategy. So there's a strategy which is dependent upon another strategy. Probably most of our strategies will be dependent upon the strategy. But I think everything else that was said makes sense, and having as a member involved. Next up, I think was Michael.
Okay, so if you go back to the previous slide,
Sorry, Michael, there are two hands online as well that I just wanted to make sure that Alan and Lisa, I think, raised their hands related to possibly the same topic.
So I think Michael had his hand up first, so I'm gonna go with Michael, unless Lisa and Mike and Alan, were you talking about this topic or something else?
I've got a question about the greenhouse gas inventory, so why don't you finish this and,
Lisa, do you have is it about this or something else?
Yeah, I just wanted to, can everybody hear me?
Yep.
I just wanted to respond to this question about the grid, which is, with all due respect, this is just a complete red herring because we are not expected to transition from a peak summer electrical load to a peak winter load for at least another decade. So, I mean, this is more of a local transformer issue, but really all you need to install a heat pump is 200 amps in most properties. So it is upgrading to 200 amps, but you need that if you're going to install air conditioning. I don't know if people can hear me because I think my
We
can hear you, Lisa.
or
Okay.
should I go ahead then?
No,
No,
I think,
next we're gonna have
yeah.
Michael.
okay, so if you go back, right, so in the first bullet here, I've noticed like some very clear criteria of success. 350 home energy assessments, 100 weatherization jobs, 16 kind heat pumps for gas replacements. So the first thing is I want to commend you for the specificity. That's I think that's really helpful, and to the extent that you can develop specific metrics of success for any one of the action items, that will be useful. And I think that actually ties to Kathleen's original comment about the moving, the coordination of the grid with some items that had specificity. So I just wanted to confirm that that level of specificity was in your planning of the development of these goals and strategies and actions over the course of the next 4 or 5 months, so that when this CARP gets released, all of those measurable results and opportunities to hold ourselves accountable for those results will be in place.
So yes, where possible. So we probably won't have. I mean, yeah, I guess yes, where possible might be my best answer at this point. If we go down through various action steps, and when we get to that stage, you will have an opportunity again to review the action step stage here in a few weeks or something like that. When we get to that point, if you do feel like certain elements are too ambiguous, we would invite comment on that. Some of the elements, some of the action steps will probably be a little more ambiguous to allow staff some flexibility in terms of how they do the implementation, just because some of the questions, some elements of that, taking that action won't have been fully worked through. So I guess I'm opening up the door just a little bit for for a little bit more open-ended action steps in some cases.
Right, I would just separate the mechanism, like how you accomplish this action item from the desired result. And maybe if you think of those two things independently, then you have the opportunity to establish the result while leaving the mechanism and the staff flexibility you need to achieve that result more open.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. I appreciate that, Michael.
Okay.
I think next we're gonna go to Alan. We'll get in line here. I know. We'll go to Alan next. We'll do one here and one online. Flip backwards and forwards. Alan,
And then I have a question after.
after Bill, sure.
Should I?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, yeah, I've got, Rich, 2 questions about the greenhouse gas inventory, and this could be something where you could supply an answer later.
Okay.
First one was the community emissions. I think the number was 295,000 metric tons. And the version that we got a few months ago was a higher number, 300 and some odd thousand metric tons. I'm just curious if there was any particular reason for that, any significant reason.
I don't know off the top of my head, Alan, but I can certainly look at that.
That's fine.
Yeah, it is. I pulled this in from our most recent presentation, so it could be a mistake of mine, or it's possible that this is just after things had been refined and numbers had settled, that this was the more final version. But I'll check on that, Alan.
Okay, that's fine. And the other question on transportation, I'm curious to know, how should I put this? What's the basis for transportation? Is this the associated with miles traveled for vehicles that are garaged in Brookline or that go through Brookline? Is it from the RMV, et cetera, et cetera? Where did the numbers come from?
Yeah, so this comes from Google data that they publish for through trips and then inbound and outbound trips. So the precise definition of that I can send to you, but they
Okay.
take those three categories and do some calculus, basically tracking cell phones and aggregating those numbers. And then they share those data with people who are sort of in their network. So we request VMT data for Brookline specifically, and then they send us those data.
Okay, yeah, if you could send me a reference for that, it'd be great. Thank you.
Yeah, great question.
Bill. Okay, back to BE Goal 1. Apparently I downloaded and added comments into a version. I thought it was just yesterday, and then there's a new version that we're working from here. So I guess this is a fairly recent update from what was on the website.
Yeah.
We
Yeah,
have
thanks.
file today. Yeah.
Okay. So the version I had has the BE Goal 1 as municipal buildings. And I asked in my comment, where's residential and commercial? Now you've had residential, commercial. Now I'm asking, where's municipal? Is that another goal that we haven't seen yet?
Yes, yeah, it's just another goal that we haven't seen yet. And yeah, apologies for the switch, but if you looked at the goal, that said municipal, then you would have seen that all the action steps were actually residential and commercial. So this simply replaces the goal with the correct one. But yeah, if you go down, so if we go down 2 slides, so I think this is the continued slide. There is one more strategy that's associated with the residential and commercial buildings, which was the BERDO strategy. And so this would be requiring large buildings to track, report, and meet declining emissions targets. Of course, this would also be supported by a series of action steps, which just aren't included here, but very similar to what's been described in Cambridge and Boston and some other places.
If I can stay with my, while I have the microphone real briefly, the percentages. So in each of these, it's X% by 20XX. And feels to me like we're at a point where we could start at least getting the 20XX answered because it's a 10-year plan, right? So
correct.
Are we really trying to say all of these goals are 2035?
No, because some of them may be 2035 and some may be sooner, and some may be both sooner and 2035, where we have a 2030 checkpoint percentage and then a 2035 mark. So depending on what the goal is, some of them may just have a 10-year, some may have a 5 and a 10-year, and some may have a shorter than 10-year goal.
But later there's a 2032. It's already been answered.
And some of that is defined by if there's a regulation or a pre-existing goal or plan, either at the state level or at the Brookline municipal level that's already been determined.
Okay.
And that's the only time we put years in.
That's helpful. Thank you. Now we have, if we can go back to that slide, the BE Goal 1 first slide. Thank you. Standardized energy. So second item on the list, standardized energy performance information. aren't we looking for more than that? Aren't we looking for actual greenhouse gas usage information in some form? You could have a fairly energy efficient building that is still consuming or generating greenhouse gas. So we don't need to debate that right now. I'm just like dropping it in as, is that really the thing we're after? And again, I probably want to race through these because I have a lot of comments and I don't want to open up 5-10 minutes of discussion about each comment. I just like to get to them. The municipal buildings had said and infrastructure. This doesn't say and infrastructure. I'm looking for a place to put things like property maintenance equipment. You know, we have 2-cycle gas-powered leaf blowers and 2-cycle gas-powered snow blowers. And in this plan somewhere, we need to find a way to replace them all with electrical battery-powered equivalents. And I haven't found where that is yet, at a goal level or a strategy level. So I don't know if it's here or somewhere else. I'm just dropping that in there because I think it's really important.
And are you talking about in that case, Bill, for municipal, or you're talking about that equipment on a private scale as
Yes.
well? Both.
Yes.
Both.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because if within the boundaries of Brookline by 2040, we have to make that all go away. We have to have a plan to get there.
Just to clarify, Alexandra, am I right in thinking that this set of strategies and actions is not meant to be a comprehensive set of strategies and actions?
That's correct.
Okay.
And also that this set is not internally prioritized, so something.
There's no prioritization here. The
So-
number BE goal 1 means absolutely nothing. It's just the first one that's listed. Yes.
Right, so for example, goals may get added or removed that we discovered through the prioritization framework are relatively low priority because they're either relatively low impact or high cost or whatever.
Exactly right. Yes, I think that makes a lot of sense.
Next slide, please. And again, I realize I'm taking some time here, but I want to run through it.
We have time today, Bill.
Not infinite. The third item, coordinating with utilities and advocating for a modern grid. So that's, I think, referring to the robustness of strengthening the electrical grid. But don't we also want to work with utilities to start identifying areas of Brookline that can be, as an area, converted from gas to electric? So if there are streets or cul-de-sacs or whatever that may need gas line replacement, to start identifying where those might be, and instead of replacing the gas line, instead replace the need for gas with electric.
I think that's what we talked about before, that we're gonna elevate this and then we're gonna build out some of the actions. Which could include
That's great.
that.
I'm just saying that the conversation up until now had been strengthen the grid, which
No, I mentioned the notes from the GMAC.
no, I'm
talking
talking
about
the
GMAC.
conversation tonight. When we were talking about the third item in this list, the conversation was about strengthening the grid.
It was not only about that,
Okay.
because we talked about the GMAC and some of the strategies and the notes that are appended to the meeting materials, and I volunteered,
Yeah.
you can help with
Look
this.
forward to
if you
getting
wanna
that.
kind of- Yeah,
Um,
yeah, so we're gonna work, I think that's something
Okay.
we'll probably.
so,
work on,
so
right?
that phrase, we
It's gonna be
understand that
elevated.
phrase to mean that it's gonna be more than just strengthening. the
It's gonna
grid.
be
It's gonna
elevated, yeah, we can, yeah,
Yeah.
it's gonna be elevated to a strategy and then with actions, I think, is what we talked
And
about.
just to clarify, Bill, I feel like you're raising a concern here that you feel like there should be more things listed here than are listed here. Is that part of the concern?
Some things that I think are kind of between the cracks of how we've defined this, the categories and goals.
Okay.
So you have a category called buildings and energy, right? So where does a leaf blower fit into a category called buildings? Well, it doesn't exactly. I just want to make sure they're not lost in the overall approach.
Yeah. So I'm hearing you, Bill, and I'm taking notes.
Yeah, not looking for solutions yet, just identify. So I think that's all I've got for BE goal 1.
Patty, you had something else?
Yeah, well, is now the time to talk about things that we couldn't find in the,
Well, why don't we finish out this buildings and energy category, and then and then we can go back and sort of fill in some of the gaps if you feel like there were missing gaps. There are a couple more goals and strategies, so it may be that some of those offers an opportunity to sort of insert
Okay,
thoughts.
I didn't see them, but I have a list. I think we can do it at the end.
Well, yeah, if you didn't see them, then, there's nothing that I haven't done anything new probably, so maybe they're not there. But this one is the Berto one, so I think there are a couple more goals here. This one is renewable energy sourcing for residential and commercial buildings. So again, sort of the private side of things. An additional strategy is increasing participation in Brookline's Community Choice Aggregation Program, increasing the percentage of participation rates, and then also facilitating access to community solar for residents and businesses through the MA Smart program. We've sort of expressed a little bit more detail here in this strategy to fill it out, especially for town staff, that the staff would focus on outreach and education as an alternative, or in addition, pursuing long-term virtual power purchase agreements. Those, as you know, are written a little bit differently, but integrating those options into the town's community choice aggregation program as well. The third goal here would be to expand renewable energy for municipal buildings. So one strategy is to pilot a geothermal utility district for town-owned facilities. Another one is to maximize solar energy installation on public buildings and property. And then the fourth goal that you can see here, and this is the final goal for this one, at least as we have drafted so far, reduce emissions from municipal operations through increased energy efficiency and decarbonization projects. So this would be prioritizing electrification of municipal buildings through a municipal decarbonization roadmap that is actually underway right now. And I think that will include equipment for the municipality, but to your point, Bill, does not necessarily touch the residential and commercial sector. And then a final strategy there, which addresses streetlights. You saw that about 6% of the municipal emissions are coming from streetlights. So this would be a dimming strategy for that particular component. So I think that's all for buildings and energy. And yeah, would love to hear Patty and anybody else on, sort of what's missing or what you feel like kind of doesn't fit or needs a little bit of a separate category.
Yeah, I also have just some questions about what's here in terms of the process.
Sure.
Put these items, maybe I'll do that first. So some of these items will need staff support, having office hours, electrification, bulk purchasing. Has there been collaboration to date with purchasing, with the building department on kind of coming up?
Yeah, we have a staff steering committee, and that includes staff representation from across. And so they actually did look at the goals and strategies here and contributed some ideas to action items for
That's
this as well.
fantastic. I'm really glad
And they'll
to hear
be engaged multiple times throughout the drafting
that.
process.
Okay, I'm really glad to hear that. Thank you. And so some of the things that I didn't see after reading the entire, and I didn't look at the switch today with the new document, so I only have notes on what was available 2 days ago. And some of them are, so I put in my, proposal or ideas or whatever document you want to call that, a given to Rich. Is there a way to incentivize electrification using some of the funds the town has, like the CPA Act fund, the HAB fund? And I raise it again because there's an analog to this idea in the Boston cap. Trying to leverage the affordable housing preservation through the Boston Acquisition Fund. I don't know, that might not be a city fund. I don't know if it's city or it must be a city fund because it sounds like they're trying to leverage it. So that kind of prompted me to add it to the list of things that might be considered that aren't here. I didn't see anything like streamline permitting to accelerate building decarbonization in new development. Boston has that also. And that's something we've talked about internally, I think, with you. I didn't see rooftop solar on residential buildings, I don't think, although there's community solar. And Boston has 5 opportunities to streamline and simplify the permitting process to accelerate the installation of rooftop solar systems on residential properties. I didn't see pilot shared renewable energy procurement for Berto buildings, which is in Boston's draft.
Say that one again, Patty?
Pilot shared renewable energy procurement for Berto buildings, and then there's some verbiage in Boston's draft kind of building that out. The city will pilot a shared procurement platform or framework to support property owners interested in participating in a joint procurement for large-scale power purchase agreements for large-scale renewable.
Could I just interrupt you?
Yeah.
For a second? So I just want to make sure we're going down the right path here. So this is not meant to be, and again, I think we said this before, this is not meant to be a comprehensive list of strategies or actions. I'm not sure that this meeting is the right place for us to identify all of the gaps that we feel are here.
I thought it was. Isn't it
Well, that's-
initial
that's-
input? That's, I
Well,
thought that's
we-
what this meeting was for. And
So we-
I asked if that's part of the things we should be.
So that, I guess that's why I'm asking
Okay.
clarification, because we've already
Mhm.
given about 6 months of input
Mhm.
to this process, which I think has been shared with Liz, right? I'm just want to clarify with Alexandra. Is the intention here that we should go through them? Because if we were to go through the list of everything that's not in this, we will be here for 2 days. And I'm not sure that's how we should be spending our time.
Could I just add just one interjection piece, Patty, specifically to some of the things that you have mentioned here? Those are included as action steps in some of the things that you've mentioned, in fact, most of them are included as draft action steps in support of several of these strategies. So for example, if you go back up to the renewable energy for commercial and residential buildings, facilitate access, community choice. I think is there one up above or down below? Reduce emissions, maximize solar energy. Yeah, anyway, the incentivizing the electrification portion, that is included in some action steps for funding possibilities. And so again, these are, these are just sort of in process. And so a lot of the things from your specific recommendations did end up in those, kind of those draft action steps. So there is that other element or that other column that is, kind of forthcoming.
Okay.
I appreciate this.
All I had. I mean, that was my list, but I'm also wondering to what extent the goals and the percentages, maybe they're in here, maybe they're not yet, will be account for the goals in the state climate plan. Which has really specific metrics in it in terms of houses, cars, all the.
Yeah, so we're staying in, we have the state plan that we're using as a guardrail. Of course, the Brookline targets are more accelerated. So, some of those may even be accelerated from the state perspective.
I think I'm not sure the incentivization using town funds is in there. So I just flagged that because that's something that I think we should really at least look at, discuss.
So there's a
That's
hand
great.
on my Alan as well.
I also have a comment.
Yeah.
I'm gonna jump in because I have yet to have a comment. I'm gonna hold you up there, Alan.
That's fine.
If you can go to the strategy for the aggregation, electric aggregation. So I am not certain that this is the right strategy. I don't think increased participation in community choice aggregation program is a strategy for zero emissions. I think the strategy here should be about improving the reducing the amount of carbon in the electricity in Brookline. And this becomes like a way that we may choose to do it. I think this is the wrong level. I think it's the wrong, because it might turn out that the community choice aggregation is not the right direction to go. And we're kind of like suggesting a solution as opposed to presenting the strategy we need to follow. So that's just the only comment I have here. And I'm not certain that. Go ahead.
How how does the strategy that you just described differ from what's listed there as goal 2?
Because, so we went through a process last year looking at Brookline Green, and we were asking, do we want to do, is it of interest for us to increase the number of people who are doing the aggregation program? And the answer is maybe, and maybe not. It really depends on what we want to do. Like, it might be that, if the state is producing enough clean energy, electricity, that's a different route. If community solar is presenting a better opportunity, that's a different route. But the aggregation program is a tool that has been very useful. It is not the solution. It is a solution.
I agree with you, but you didn't answer my question,
Which is,
the strategy above that.
Yeah.
That you just articulated sounded to me like what's written up there is PE goal 2, increase renewable energy sourcing by X% for residential and commercial buildings. And maybe,
I'm not even sure, but maybe it's just I don't agree with the strategy particularly.
okay.
You might be right.
Is there concern with that strategy with the community choice? I mean, it sort of depends on what the pool is that you're drawing from, right? And you can sort of beggar thy neighbor just by shifting those carbon units around a little bit.
To give a concrete example, we're tied into an agreement with Brookline Green Energy for a certain period of time. I think it's 3 years. So if Eversource comes out with a pricing structure for electricity, which is 50% of the price of BGE, then our goal should absolutely not be that we have all of town members, including the low income people, using BGE, because
Certainly.
it doesn't make any sense at that point.
Yep.
Right? So this is not a goal. To me, this is not an outcome by itself.
Can I just say one thing too? I mean, we talked about community solar perhaps being a superior approach to.
Yes, exactly. Or power purchase agreements, or a variety of other things. So I feel like this could be tweaked, and I think we've talked about it enough, and we can move on to Alan.
Okay. Yeah, Rich, since you changed the first couple of slides to be residential and commercial, and then separated out the municipal, which I think was a good idea, by the way. I think Birdo probably needs to be repeated in municipal, because all the Birdos around us are both for municipal and private.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, thanks, Alan. You're absolutely right. Yeah.
Thank you.
Everything Patty said earlier, I agree with, and where you said residential solar, rooftop solar, also commercial. Just to flesh that out, because I would really, and I hope we can continue to identify things we think should be part of the plan and don't find. I thought that was one of the main goals for the meeting today.
That's what.
And I also hope, not the plan we come up with is the plan, not one of several plans, another plan of which includes the things that weren't included in this plan. I hope at a certain level, we are consistent across the board. There may be details that we're not seeing here because they're assigned to action level instead of strategy level or whatever. But I hope we can continue to move the discussion along by saying I'd like to see something like this included in our planning going forward. And I think the rooftop solar for commercial and residential is key. Commercial in particular, I think there's more possibility there, and having a more proactive strategy or action steps to make that happen should be part of it.
What's Alexander, just in terms of process today? So I think we have a little bit of a difference of opinion about what today's meeting was. But let's also review briefly. So the next step coming out of this is there's going to be a CARP draft. And I'm presuming the CARP draft is going to be quite a long document.
So yeah, I would say there's 2 drafts. So there's the draft of, well, maybe more. There's the draft of the action plan. So the action plan is the actions, strategies, and goals. And so what you're seeing is 30% of that action plan here this evening. So then in addition to the action plan, then there is the full CARP document itself, which will also have more narrative text background, data, et cetera, sourcing to it, that kind of thing, research. So the next steps after this evening are for us to take feedback heard here, and for us to take feedback that we have been working on as staff as we've been refining this, collect all that up, and then do an updated iteration of goals, strategies, and start building in more of the actions with that. And that will take place over the next several weeks, and then return to ZIAB with an updated action plan for review and input on. So I think for this evening's purposes, if folks want to share out what they feel isn't reflected here, that's fine. I have I'm taking notes, Rich is taking notes, Rebecca's taking notes, Zoom's taking notes. So it can be captured that way. You can also follow up and send a note to myself and Rebecca afterwards, and we can capture things there. I think, Rich, for our purposes this evening, we can just, we won't keep saying, yeah, we've got that. It's just you're not seeing it here this evening, because I understand that. How would you know that? I know that because I've read this 750,000 times over the last 3 weeks, but you don't know that. So we're happy to take all of that feedback, and then if it's already in there, great. And if it's not, we'll find a way to work it in.
That sounds great. Thank you. And just out of curiosity, there's presumably some kind of master document, maybe an Excel spreadsheet or something like that, that you have all this stuff listed out in?
Yes, we do.
Okay. So not now, but at some point we should have a discussion about whether there is an opportunity to review the raw document before it goes and gets turned into a beautiful marketing document, because it might be easier to review that in a simpler format than we can talk about that later.
Yeah, I think that'll be in November. That's what you'll see.
Yeah.
You'll see the full action plan, but it won't be in the shiny, pretty format.
Yeah.
It'll just be worked on page.
We want the ugly format because it'd be easier to work with, right? Okay. I'm just saying it's otherwise, you spend all the time making it pretty, and then we come in and say we want other things. I mean, that's a waste of everyone's time. Okay.
Can I make a super process comment, which is maybe too much of a lawyer's comment, but as particularly since this is only 30%, we're only looking at a little bit here, it's going to be a huge amount of data, a lot of strategies, a lot of action plans. Could you, I think it would be very valuable to number it all, to have, big sections in Roman numerals, then A's and numbers and B's, so that you can, if you're discussing something here, somebody says, well, what about, more efficient sailboats in the harbor? Somebody can say, well, we already have that in section 4.3.1b2. So you can actually find it. Let's say, well, I think that's in there somewhere. Let me look under the bullet points, under the, it's so complicated. I think numbering it might help.
That's a good idea. I like that.
Yeah, that's great. We got to sort of this BE level, BE goal 2. So strategy, for example, could be BE 2.1, and then action is BE 2.1A or something like that.
Great. So we are about, I would say, 30% of the way through the presentation. Does that sound right? And we have spent about an hour going through it. So I'm going
to suggest, for the purposes of this conversation, Rich, that we skip to transportation and mobility. I think that's the other focus area of most entrants to ZIAB, and then the prioritization framework. And then as time permits, we can come back to resource conservation, natural systems, and resilience.
Great. So here that sounds great, Alexandra, thanks. So here we have sustainable transportation and mobility. So this is, the category, we have it listed as the third category. And our number one goal here is to reduce the number of registered internal combustion engines or engine vehicles in Brookline by a certain percentage. And then a draft strategy would be to increase the number of unique drivers that utilize public charging stations to a number here, and by a certain year through the expansion of charging in public parking lots, commercial districts, and high-density residential areas. The action steps that might be associated with that are to prioritize the installation of some fast chargers in high traffic areas, Secondly, to leverage state and federal incentive programs and explore public-private partnerships to reduce installation and operating costs, monitoring station usage and revenue to inform future locations, charging fees, etc. And I think on the next slide, there may be some other action steps. No, but there are some other strategies. So reducing barriers to increase the installation of EV charging stations on private properties and for renters. So these steps would be associated with zoning restrictions. And the next one here is a BERDO strategy that relates to the electric vehicle charging in residential and commercial buildings. So that there would be a report out for that infrastructure. And then I think we move to a second goal, which is to achieve full electrification of the municipal fleet, except for mission critical vehicles that lack viable alternatives. And the strategy here is to adopt an EV first policy that standardizes the purchase of zero emission vehicles for the fleet when they are available. The third goal is to reduce number of vehicle trips within Brookline. So this goes to the VMT sort of metric. And one strategy is increasing walkability and bikeability, particularly between high density areas in terms of improving connectivity. Secondly, improving the reliability and accessibility of public transportation in Brookline. And of course, there would be action steps that would be supporting each of these. And then the fourth, and I believe final goal, is to reduce emissions from staff commuting. This strategy would be a comprehensive employee commuting program to reduce VMTs or vehicle miles traveled through flexible work policies, perhaps some incentives for mode shift, and then continuous performance monitoring over time. So that builds out what we have thus far for goals and strategies, at least in the sustainable transportation and mobility category. And just as we did with the last one, it would be great to hear, what's missing, what do you not see, or what needs some refinement?
You will go first. You go first.
So if you go up to the electrification, this one, municipal fleet, there's got to be a component of, and I know this is obvious, but there does have to be a component of cost in here. And I'm just thinking about like fire engines, which are fantastically expensive things. And I know that that's already in here, but I just want to note that, electrifying police cars, which are driving around all the time, makes a lot of sense. Fire engines spend the vast majority of their time in the fire station, and they're very, very expensive to electrify. So there is a component not just of like things that lack viable electrical alternatives, but also based upon, the framework and the rewards, right?
And so just to clarify, Nick, thank you. Here you're saying that you feel like that cost component should be reflected actually in the words of the goal, not just in the fact that likely a fire truck would be deprioritized on the list of electrification because of the cost and impact.
Well, the word viable kind of captures that, right? I mean, wasn't that, that's how I read that.
I'm going to go with you. You're quite correct. I like that. As usual. Come up with good ideas. Great. Viable, that's
Fewer.
Great. I will clarify. Okay.
Yes. That would reduce the viability of it. Thank you.
You have.
My hand is up, but you can go ahead.
You want to, okay. So I have a question about reduce barriers to increase installation of EV charging stations. It's on page, the old one is on page 19.
Yeah, is this one you see here?
Yes.
Is that Patty? I'm sorry, I can't see the room very well.
It is, yeah. Thank you. So you said this is zoning, it has to do with zoning. I'm not aware of any zoning barriers. Were there any identified in coming up with this?
Well, I guess I was thinking of, maybe I was thinking of something different when I said that. I guess I'm thinking particularly of, making sure that renters have those availabilities, and then if there are any restrictions for private properties that, that permitting and so forth can sort of be taken care of. So yeah, I guess no restrictions for zoning Yeah, I just misspoke.
And I think that the main, I don't know if it's a problem, but something we've discussed in the past is in preservation districts. And so that's kind of, we think that, the Preservation Commission is on board and understands kind of new legal requirements on this. But, there's a component of, just kind of keeping an eye out for that, I guess. That's the only thing I could think of in reading this other than, for owners, as opposed to renters. I just want to comment on that.
Just to comment on that quickly. We obviously we have parking minimums, parking gaps built into our building, and we also are starting to have bicycle
Yes.
requirement. And I don't know whether it's reducing a barrier or providing a requirement, but there would be nothing to prevent us that I can think of to add to our zoning code that says, and of those parking spaces that you have, so many of them need to have the capacity for charging.
I think.
Yeah. Maybe something.
Under certain,
council
overlay districts
Like,
or however you.
preemptive, blah, blah. Yeah.
I think it's a matter of sort of leveling it. The strategy is basically to install more charging stations, and then in terms of actions, it's do you have to reduce zoning? Is there a zoning barrier that we've gotten rid of? Or the funding problems, or the psychological issues in condos?
Yeah.
That this, probably the strategy tries to do too much. It really is just install more charging stations will help reduce the number of ICEs.
There's,
Yeah.
I think there's stuff we talked about actually in the new construction side of things, which said, if you take these actions, maybe we would give you more FAR. So
Yeah.
there's other things we can do too,
Yes,
but
yes.
maybe not. Yeah, so it's in that category,
Yes.
but not necessarily as of.
As opposed to barriers, it's incentive.
I think it's more,
As
there's
well
more
as-
opportunity for.
Yeah, so maybe that should be.
Yeah.
And increase incentives.
So
So I missed so I got reducing barriers and increasing or maybe leveraging incentives.
So,
Or we might need to develop incentives.
yes,
Is the right
Yeah.
word.
yeah, and my initial thoughts were on that same sentence with a couple of focus on a few words, but I think what we're talking about is increasing the installation of, right?
Mhm.
And then there are two parts to that, reduce the barriers and add incentives.
Developing
So the
incentives.
goal is increase installation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, I want to focus on a couple words and then the mindset behind them. I think it should be EV charging solutions, not just EV charging stations. And the reason I say that is because a
Mhm.
conventional
Yeah.
110 volt trickle charge can be very effective for many, many people. And we have this wonderful thing called the public charging station if you need faster charges available. But I think the focus on adding charging stations to private residences and so on is a cost barrier, it's an infrastructure barrier, it's kind of a
Yeah.
big deal. And I have personal experience and other people I know who the trickle charge is working
Yeah.
fine.
And I think,
And so I think
yeah.
if we can say EV charging solutions, and at some point flesh out what we
Yeah.
mean by the word solutions.
to illustrate, Cambridge has been toying around with the cross sidewalk,
Well, that's another thing I wanted to say.
slow charging trickle to on-street parking.
Yeah, the curbside
Mhm.
charging, whether it's
From
a
a
strategy or an
building.
action, I don't know, but curbside charging, I'm already on it, but should be part of this.
Slowly-
And then the other wording thing is renters, because yes, renters, but really it's people who live in multi-unit residences where they don't have control over where they park. So if you have a single family home and an off-street driveway, you can do much more. And so I hope we can be looking at this problem set more broadly than the words that are there, because I think
that's covered by private properties.
But just to be clear, it's single family homes. Condominium.
Condos, that should include condominiums. I do think there's an increased requirement for people who do not have control over their,
yeah,
and it could be because people live in a single family home and not have a parking space. I mean, that does happen in Brooklyn.
Sure.
Less common, but it does happen, right? Or you don't have sufficient parking, maybe for your
So-
3 cars.
so the sentence is,
I mean, for condos, there's now more protection for,
Yeah.
against,
New comments.
yeah,
Yeah,
being
yeah.
meddled with, yeah.
Well, really, the drafting problem, there's one part that's not parallel, it says properties of
Exactly.
people. And somehow, it's really just drafting, we should have spent.
The
time there,
sentence is
but-
doing a lot of work, but I think behind what's there,
Between.
we need to kind of tease out, some critical, I think important issues.
I will note that on the, and I don't want to get a big discussion, the trickle charging, I know it works, I've done it. But I think there's a little bit of a slippery slope where if you say, well, trickle charging is fine. Well, it's fine for some people. And actually, if ZAP came out with a kind of position or the town came out with a position that said trickle charging is fine for everyone, that could actually undermine any efforts we have to get higher speed charging in place for the people who need it, which is quite a large proportion of the population. So I do want to be cautious. I think it's the change you're suggesting is fine. I do want to be cautious about us being clear that that's only a solution for some people and under some circumstances.
I'm just suggesting the word solutions at this level and then
Yeah.
let the discussion begin.
Yeah.
And then I don't know if we got to STM goal 3, or are we still on?
Yeah, no, we haven't, but go ahead, Bill.
Walkability and bikeability between high density areas. I don't think it's just between high density areas. We want bikeability, particularly safe bikeability around low density areas in the town. To improve accessibility and connectivity.
Okay.
High density is a little easier, strangely enough. I mean, it's not, but we're having more difficulty with the low density, I think. Okay.
Okay. And are you, so you're suggesting adding that to the high density or just removing the notion of density and just including it more broadly community-wide?
The latter. I don't see it being limited to high density areas. And I don't.
Okay.
Just
Are you thinking of, Bill, also specifically about bikeability? Because walkability in low density areas is,
if there are sidewalks there, sure.
I mean, isn't there a whole transportation plan on this, like with
Yeah.
our schools?
There-
This is the language is under inclusive of what's in the plan.
I think this was taken from the plan.
It might have been, but the plan also has, for example, I mean, wasn't there talk of making sure that kids can bike to school, their routes for
Sure,
kids?
safe routes to
Yeah.
school.
That's not necessarily a high density area.
That's right. I think high density areas.
Yeah,
should-
Correct. So I think that's a,
That's a
That's a-
verbiage issue.
well, I was gonna say it's actually, in my mind, a bigger picture issue of there are a lot of other plans that have goals that connect to this plan. Urban forestry
Mhm.
has tree goals, like, oh my God. The transportation mobility plan, thank you, has transportation goals, Safe Routes to School has goals. So there's lots of other plans that have goals that connect to this one. I think it's a question of at what point did this plan become watered down and too much? Because we're pulling in the goals from other plans
Yeah.
and the ownership for some of those goals doesn't really sit with
Mhm.
us. Now, the ownership for every single one of these doesn't sit with us. It's going to require a lot of
Mhm.
coordination in general. That's what sustainability or climate is. But I think that's a little bit of something that I've been struggling with as I've been going through this is when do we pull in what's already existing and when do we say, no, that's going to sit there and live with that plan. And there are people dedicated to that, but that shouldn't be the focus of limited resources and time as we try to solve the climate crisis in this
Well,
land.
here's my question then. I mean, why this language? Was it determined to be particularly impactful and easily implemented and has returned? I mean, why was this
Prioritization
one?
hasn't happened.
Right.
the prioritization.
And if our focus
I
here
know,
is.
that's why. So why this language and not something other language?
Should the
from-
language change?
Yeah, so why not include this? Why?
Well, it
Why
should
not
be
include
all,
schools?
pretty all inclusive now, since the prioritization hasn't happened yet. But like another thing that shouldn't be lost here is not just bikeability, walkability, but micromobility needs to fit in there, because these things need to be prioritized.
So I'm not sure what we're gonna do. I'm not sure we're gonna solve this problem right now. I do want to go back to what you just said, Alexander, about whether or not the CARP should include everything that's in every other plan if it has anything to do with like climate. And I don't think it should, because there should ideally only be one source of truth for whatever it is that we're doing. But we do have to think about how we reference them.
Yeah.
And then we might also want to think about, we might want to be putting some other large items from other plans through a prioritization framework that says that we think this is important, although it's referred to from the plan. Having it repeated doesn't help anyone. It just creates conflict.
But I just have to ask why.
Why is this
language?
one?
So I'm wondering if there's a defense for this. What's the defense for choosing this one?
This was
I think
considered to be the most impactful from the transportation
Okay.
mobility goals
Okay.
as deferred to by the transportation
Okay.
staff. So that's how selections were
Okay.
made in terms of
Mhm.
what went into this lineup, but that doesn't necessarily mean that there could be other things pulled in. It was just a
Mhm.
question of, are we gonna pull in 5? Or are we gonna pull in 1? If we're gonna
Okay.
pull in 1, here's the one that's the most impactful based off of
Okay.
the staff discussion on it.
Okay, that makes sense. I appreciate that. Thank you.
So are we, I mean, I don't know what to do with the discussion about where did this come from. To me, I think what should be in the CARF should be a broader statement that takes out the phrase high density areas, right? Because I think,
Yep,
and
understood.
replacing bikeability with micro mobility more generally, or adding to it or whatever. Okay, so that all stays, right?
Yes.
yeah, that's great, Bill.
And the public transportation in and to and from Brookline, right?
Yeah.
Should be the bigger picture.
Can I give what I think is an example of what Alexander is talking about when you say there are plans in other places? You know, all of the conversation about housing density near transit, for example, which is, you know, appears within housing production plans and the comprehensive plan and so forth, is also intended to reduce the number of vehicle trips within Brookline. Right. But I don't think the CARF wants to take on all of the housing goals and sub-goals that would be required as part of that strategy.
And I think that goes exactly to what Nick, you were saying, which is that those things need to be in there, but somehow footnoted or something. That for instance, we don't want people to read the plan and say, well, why isn't such and such in your plan? It needs to be in there saying, yes, there's going to be certain transportation being done, but it's being done by transportation.
And I think there's an
But people
Yes.
need to know why. And there was an answer to why. The why was the mini prioritization framework of impactful. I mean, that's the answer.
I think
I mean, people,
he's talking about something slightly different. I think
Oh.
what he's talking about is that there is this other plan, maybe run by a different group, not Alexandra's group. We need to be able to say, we recognize that this is important in our car, but we're not actually responsible for it. Right?
Particularly
Is that what you were saying?
in the transportation board, they have a plan that has 50 things in it. You know, and some of them are like, you know, to make crosswalk safer. We don't care about that. But we hopefully, what we will have done, or you hope will have done, is look at those 50 things and say, oh, actually, these 3 have big climate impact. We're not going to do that, or we're going to help you. We're going to work with transportation board, transportation staff on one of them, but 2 of them are things that they're just going to do on their own. But we're referencing it here, so somebody reads the climate action plan, they recognize that yes, this is an important climate action activity.
I think
It's interesting to me that you said the example that you gave about crosswalks, and you don't care about that. But if your strategy is to increase walkability and bikeability, you might.
you chose.
We're not gonna help specify the crosswalk.
I was just,
Well, but the
I was
answer
just
is
thinking about
impact.
Warren Street, which has like, you know, no crosswalks. And I'm always trying to walk on Warren Street and it drives me crazy.
I mean-
But you're exactly right, Michael, you're exactly right. I just picked an example. That's one of the ones that we would say, yeah, this is important, but we have nothing to do with, actually, we're not gonna monitor that. We're gonna let the transportation board
Right.
monitor how many crosswalks are going in and out.
Right.
Just because it's.
I think, you know, some initial statements when we were summarizing the, you know, bigger plans that exist already in Brookline and just calling attention to the fact that these plans exist. There are many strategies, some of which may even, you know, address the climate crisis. We have selectively taken certain strategies and brought them in here, though not every strategy that, you know, that might be completely parallel to our efforts. And then, you know, sort of from a broad perspective for the different plans. Hopefully that will, sort of, I don't know, if we need to get more specific, of course we can, but maybe that will ameliorate some of the kind of, why this and not this, if we give a little bit of a criteria for how we pulled those specific ideas out and not others.
Yeah, people need to know why.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah, Alan.
Oh, sorry. didn't see
Oh,
Alan.
sorry, I didn't realize.
Yeah.
I can't see the room very well. I can see the yellow hands, but
I'm sorry, should I go ahead? This is Alan.
Yeah, go ahead, Alan. Sorry, I just missed you. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, it strikes me what you were talking about, the connectivity between all these various plans, but ultimately, I thought one of the overarching principles of the CARP, whether it comes from other plans or it's coming from within ZAB, is that we do have this prioritization. And ultimately, some of these things are going to be, even if it was only coming from ZAB, the priority would be sufficiently low that we wouldn't list it in CARP. I would think if there's something from the Transportation Board or from the housing policy or something that is sufficiently high that it meets the priority standard, that it could be noted in here as a high priority. And if it's not in here.
That makes a lot of sense.
agreed, yeah.
absolutely. And I think that's a great transition point. So thank you, Alan. So why don't we move to talk a little bit about the prioritization framework? And we can come back and talk about the other goals after that. I just want to note that at this point, the prioritization framework has not been applied. So we haven't prioritized anything because there's not enough there to prioritize yet. But so what we're talking about tonight and what Rich is going to be talking about is really the structure of it, which is pretty similar to what ZHAB has seen and worked intimately with over the last several months, but does have some tweaks that we have applied based off of trying to run through some of the different strategies, particularly some of the capital projects and some of the non-building related projects, because that's obviously rightfully where ZHAB focused a lot of their time. But the plan, we want the prioritization framework to really work for the plan. So Rich, I'll hand it over to you.
Yeah, so the first is just, and you guys have wrestled with the whole prioritization component, so you understand this very well, just the rationale for prioritizing strategies in the first place. But just for the public meeting, the CARP will include many climate action strategies across a lot of different sectors, and not all of those can be implemented at one time. So we need a consistent way to sort of compare options and then prioritize that work. That helps us focus on the strategies with the greatest climate impact, feasibility, equity benefits, long-term value. We use the term low-hanging fruit. So if you're getting a high impact at a relatively low cost, that may be a good place to start. But these other components that we'll talk about here in a minute also fill out that more binary, assessment. So the strategies or the criteria rather are cost, which is sort of upfront and ongoing cost to the town or the community. Funding availability, this would be the likelihood of leveraging state, federal, private funds, town funds, et cetera. Staff capacity, this is the ability to deliver within current or expected staff resources. So we can talk a little bit more about how we categorized each one of these, but that's just a sort of a top line definition of the criteria there. Ease of implementation for residents. So this was very focused on the residential implementation ease or degree of difficulty, to both, that they can benefit from, understand, access, participate, so forth. Climate and or adaptation impact. So this is potential reduction in greenhouse gas emissions or improved resilience to climate risks, and then financial ROI, which were the expected cost savings or avoided costs over 15 years. And then we get to the multipliers. These multipliers, I think, and Alan, I see that your hand is raised there, so we'll finish out this slide here and then get to the question. The multipliers are uplifting the strategies that sort of include these qualities. So direct versus indirect, the strategy itself in the direct category immediately in how it reduces GHG emissions or improves resilience. So that's an important addition. Indirect, that the strategy influences or enables others to take actions that reduce emissions or increase resilience. Then we have the equity multiplier. This is the extent to which the strategy reduces burdens and increases benefits for underserved or vulnerable populations. And then public visibility or support, how visible the action will be and how likely it is to garner public support. So yeah, so that sort of describes them. Here's what it would look like in a matrix. So we have, for example, maximize solar energy installations on public property. The cost, a high cost would be, it would get a lower priority reading. Funding availability, existing staff scope, ease of implementation for residents, climate adaptation or impact, and then the ROI for the town or the residents. And then we have the multipliers that are behind that. So to the extent that these categories are similar to the categories that ZIAB developed, the scoring is actually identical. So we just reproduced the scoring mechanism that ZIAB worked on and applied it to the categories that you see here. So I'll stop there. And Alan, if you have your hand up first, then.
Okay, yeah, if you could go back 2 slides, one more, okay. Ease of implementation for residents. Some of these things could be for commercial property owners who are not residents.
That's a great point. So I think that the implication here would be to apply to both. So that's yeah, that's great. So it would be to either residents or commercial occupants.
Yeah, you can make up the
like
words.
that.
It's
Yeah.
fine.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
then
that's great.
And then go down 2 slides below this. One up from that, one up from there. Okay. Yeah, public visibility. I just wanted to mention it. Either our last meeting or 2 meetings ago, we had big discussion on visibility. And I thought, at least within our meeting, we said rather than use the term visibility, we were going to use the term awareness, because visibility, some people seem to take as physical visibility.
That's a great note, Alan. That's my fault. I didn't make that change. So thank you.
No blame. Okay, thank you.
Warner, did you raise your hand?
I'll go ahead. So, it's cost and ROI are very closely related concepts that a lot of people in the public won't really understand it, even some professionals mix it up. It seems to me at an absolute minimum, they need to appear next to each other. Shouldn't be cost to be number one and ROI at the end. And I really think they really kind of need to be combined, because there are some things you will do have an ROI, some things won't have any ROI, some things just have a cost. And therefore, you could express that as a negative ROI maybe, or a 0 ROI. I don't know how you want to do it, but I think right now having those as 2 separate things very far apart is quite confusing.
So could I just clarify on that, Werner? So you're saying that one, are you saying they should be combined into one category, and get one score of high, medium, or low? Or
I'm not sure what, I think maybe the category is something like financial something. I don't know what the category is, but if you take an example, so I'm not sure what a good example would be, but when you say cost, does that mean upfront cost? Does that mean?
Yeah.
If it only means upfront cost, then it's at least needs to be next to ROI, because there's some things that we're going to say, well, the upfront cost is really high, but it's going to pay for itself in 6 months. So it's a complicated thing how those things interact, because in the political terms, if you have something that has a very high upfront cost but a very high ROI, it's still going to be hard to push through politically, or maybe it's hard to find the money. So some of these things are so closely related that I think it's confusing, at least that you have those things that you don't acknowledge how closely related they can be.
I think putting them together makes a lot of sense. The part of the reason to separate them out is I think if you don't have them as separate items, and I mean, these have been separate, I think, for a while, as we've gone through the prioritization framework. You don't have them as separate and you present a single number, then you're open to a critique that you haven't considered the full cost. You're just presenting this final cost, and people argue that ROI may not be what you think it is, and the cost, like we've been through that. We went through that with which school was it? Did the
Driscoll?
Driscoll. We went that.
Oh, Pierce for Groundwork, sorry, you were talking about.
The Pierce, where people were like, well, I don't believe your numbers on the return on investment. So separating them out, I think, is a good best practice because it gives people
Then you don't next to each other.
I think that makes a lot of sense.
Two slides back from where we are now, right? I think just to visualize what one was talking about.
Well,
There,
that's
It's right there.
the
so
matrix.
there, cost, immediately after you've talked about cost,
Okay,
next
which
which should be
reflects-
ROI.
Yeah.
So,
In the previous one, cost was both upfront and ongoing cost, just to clarify, because you had asked. It's- so-
So there's upfront cost and operating cost.
Yeah, the slide, two slides before this one, I think helps this discussion.
Yeah, right there.
There. So it defined it as including ongoing.
Yeah, ongoing should go out, because ongoing is covered by ROI.
well, maybe, I think it depends on what it is. So cost was not something, ZF had a different term that they've been using, and we split that into cost and funding availability because it also mattered, I think, what the upfront investment is going to need to be. So maybe the ongoing word in this definition should not be here, but I think cost upfront matters for the investment that needs to be made, and then whether the funding is available through any existing source or not, I think is another criteria that matters. And then separately from that is what are the cost savings or the avoided costs over whatever the lifespan is that we decide we want to weigh that. So I do think that they're three separate things because in some cases, the upfront cost is very high and the funding availability is very low, and that in itself kind of
Kills it.
kills it.
Yeah, well, as long as all those relate, just like stick ROI in there somewhere, either a second or third.
Sure,
So
so
sort of
the
acknowledgement
three
that
money
all
ones are all
those three
together.
things all get considered.
Yeah,
And then
yeah.
maybe all under a category of money.
Yeah.
I just want to make sure in what you just said, Alexandra, because that it aligns with what you mean by cost, because this is cost, says upfront and ongoing costs to the town or community. So presumably, if the money is likely to come from the state or federal, the cost could be zero,
Mhm.
even though it requires money to do.
Yeah,
And I think that's where we get into this. I think if the money was coming from, for example, getting money back from the state, this is a conversation we had about Driscoll again, I can't remember what it was. Pierce, was that, we said, well, we're gonna get money back from the state, and the complaint there was, well, are we sure we're gonna get the money? Right, because if there are, you're telling us we're gonna get the money, what if we don't get the money?
Right.
Right, and so that was part of the kind of the why we said we want to have the upfront costs as one thing, and then these other things, because they are less certain. And they have more
Right,
variability.
But then you want to take out the words to the town or
Yeah,
community.
exactly.
right?
I think you want to have it just be cost.
Because
upfront
funding
cost,
availability is
and then have a category that says ongoing cost or ROI. Because basically, if there's a lot of ongoing costs, that basically means it's a negative ROI. And if I'm not sure again exactly how this works, but those things related, right? I mean that.
Yeah.
If something has no ongoing cost, you might have something that has no ongoing cost, except the financing costs, and then you look at ROI, and there's some things that has both the financing costs and maintenance costs, and then that affects ROI. So that upfront cost is the first thing you look at, and then at some point you look at all the future costs.
I think moving them together makes sense. It's sort of like a money section with three subcategories. I think that makes a lot of sense.
sure. Just because you can't see them, we have two hands raised online. One is John Bowman, a member of the public, and one's Alan Levinson. So just want you to know.
Okay, well, let's jump to the member of the public because we haven't had a lot of public discussion.
Mhm.
So let's do that.
Okay, I want to make sure I'm still in line.
Oh, you're still in line.
I
I saw you.
line too.
I saw you.
After Bill.
Very.
I've got.
There was a
Immediately
moment
that guy
there with
inside of my head, so
the
we're all set.
discussion around cost and so on.
John,
Yes, John Bowman, Town Meeting Member Precinct 10. I have a question about the criteria for prioritization. If you could go to that last slide. I'm a little bit concerned because I don't know how you're going to use these criteria and the weighting. The impression I get is that each one of these criteria will be given a numeric score, and you'll add up the scores over the 6 criteria, and then you'll multiply them based on a judgment about the multipliers. And you'll end up with a single quantitative number, and you'll put them in a table, all the strategies or all the goals or all the tasks, and say which ones are the most important based on that.
that is correct.
Pardon me?
That is correct.
Well, my concern is, and it relates to what was just being spoken about, whether to have 3 or 2 or 1 category for the cost or money related criteria. If each of these criteria gets equal weight, except for the multipliers, then whether you have 1 or 2 or 3 money related criteria will make a big difference in the final scoring.
Yeah.
And I also think that climate adaptation impact is really important. That's what this is all about. So it should naturally be given higher weight probably than other criteria. So those are just some thoughts I have about the scoring system.
If I just could jump in, and then Nick, maybe you can go, but we had, I was thinking we'd go through the cost, and I don't have the Excel spreadsheet in front of me, but I remember we had dollars per metric ton of CO2 or something like that, and there were different weights. So I assume that some sort of mechanism like that is in there, where I think the reduction of CO2, it wasn't high, medium, low. They were numerical things, and as John, I think it addresses what you're saying, John, that there was higher weight given to certain things compared to others.
So that's definitely true. I do think that John raises a good point. So we did have initially 2 financial measures, one of which was ease of initial financing, and the second of which was financial ROI. In splitting it into 3, that's completely fine. But when we're looking at the weight given to high, medium, and low for, I guess we've now got cost and financial availability, we need to split the weight. So like the weight for high was 100.
Mhm.
We would need to split that weight into 50 and 50. Otherwise, we would be, per John's point, giving more weight to the financial aspects than we otherwise would before. So I do think we need to just go back and look at that. I don't think it's very complicated. I think it's pretty straightforward. And I think town and staff can make the determination about how you want to take the 100 for high and split it across those 2 things. And that's fine. Does that make sense, Alexandra?
It does. I just want to make sure though that we always had 2 criteria for related to money. Now we have 3, so it always was going to have more weight to it as a function overall.
Yes.
And I just want to make sure that that is still.
I think
appropriate.
having 2 is appropriate because we've been through this a bunch of times. I just think having 3 and not then adjusting the value of the weight for that one which is being split into 2, I think that's problematic.
Got it. Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Could I make one comment too about that, is that the impact score, in your original framework was weighted significantly higher than the financial metrics. And that's still in there, that remains. So I agree that, you know, we can certainly, I think it'd be really healthy to take another look at the way that all of these are weighted. We are experimenting with, you know, sort of that category there that says climate or adaptation impact. And we are, you know, as objectively as possible, trying to, if there's a direct, you know, sort of a high score for the adaptation impact, then that would accelerate that particular strategy and it would uplift it, as would this direct versus indirect impact, which has, at least the way it's scored right now, a fairly significant multiplier. So it
That was
kind of
my point.
doubly, you know, lifts that one up. So just wanted to point out sort of where the scoring is now relative to that resiliency or adaptation component.
Can I speak to what you just said, which was why I raised my hand?
We can, but I'll just note we are close to time and I'm going to call the meeting at 7, so make it quick.
Okay, yeah, my question is gonna be why direct versus indirect versus climate impact, you know, and going to all the other points that have been made by everybody, really. You know, I mean, we were calculating carbon reductions. I mean, that's really, isn't that where it's at? You know, and so, why would you, just to kind of elaborate and support what you just said, Rich, about the direct versus indirect as a multiplier?
Well, this was the multiplier. I think this was the multiplier that we got from you all in terms of direct versus indirect. So it's possible that Alan might be able to talk to that a little bit.
But the whole framework's a little different now, you know?
Sure.
There's no way you calculate, I mean, there's no multiplier for, anyway, there's no
So the three
multiplier for
multiplied
tons of carbon reduced.
Climate impact is, I know this is probably hard to read, but just to clarify, climate/adaptation impact is just incorporating, there's a climate impact, which is greenhouse gas reductions, and then there's an adaptation impact.
So it's the same 3 multipliers that we've had since, I think, January of this year.
I'm commenting on it now that we saw the way Birdo worked out last week or the week before compared to community solar, which did, you know, there were just some things that were wonky.
So the one, I think just to address the wonkiness, I think you brought this up before. We spent a little bit of time I spent a little bit of time with Alexandra and Blue Strike to talk through the prioritization framework. And I think we talked about it as a group and we noted that there were some wonkiness and there's different ways of looking at numbers, and different people might have different perspectives. So, you know, Werner might score something differently or think about it differently than you do, Patty, or myself. And so I sent an email earlier today, which I hope you all got, which basically noted that we're going to transition the framework to Alexandra. And some part of that is to get rid of the wonkiness. It's so that there's one person who's in charge of saying, what does direct versus indirect mean? What does equity mean? As opposed to having these different voices. And I think a lot of the wonkiness will come out when that happens. But also note, there will still be some wonkiness, right? And we'll still have to.
And we'll still be able to express our opinions.
Correct.
Tonight.
We'll be able to advise and say we think this is not quite right.
Yeah.
I just also want to note you have a hand behind you for the public as well, and I know Bill still has his hand. So.
In the national goals, priority goals, we would education in our school system be as someone who graduated from the Brookline school system. I did not see anything in the elementary and middle school system. I have so much great work in the high school. Because that's doing in year 2.
Yeah. So do you mind just also for the record, just stating your name and your precinct or address?
Henry Grill.
Great.
And I live in this area, Brookline Village.
Great. Thank you. So there are education goals that are sit within each of the different 5 categories. So it's divided up by the topic areas themselves. So we didn't necessarily get to all of those tonight, but education will kind of be infused throughout all. And I think particularly it's very prominent in the resilience and preparedness category, as well as the natural systems and community well-being, which we didn't touch on as much tonight. But good.
Also, where would the new plant-based tree going to?
The what?
Japan phase 3.
Oh, that is within natural systems as well.
Okay.
Thank you.
Can we go back 2 slides, please? To the prioritization criteria. I just wanted to confirm what I think we landed on, but there was some confusion around it. And I think it's important.
Oh, sorry, it just took a minute to catch up.
Indeed. So I think number 1, cost, we're talking about, there was some thought that that was net of any funding available. We're saying that's not the case. So it is cost in and of itself. And it's the second item that tells us about what might mitigate that cost to the town.
I think that's the change that has happened in this version of it. So I'll let Alexandra answer that.
Yes, that's correct.
And there may be some cost of capital issues if there's a timing or problem, around that, but that's an important distinction. And the other thing I just wanted to mention is that ROI is a rate deal, right? So ROI doesn't really capture the scale of what we're talking about. And so I understand the reasons to be listing all 3 and aggregating them together, but you could have a terrific ROI on a very small amount of money. And that doesn't really, it's a different impact than the scale of cost and particularly funding available against them. Not sure where to go with that thought, but we shouldn't be thinking of ROI as the same kind of number as cost and availability, because it's more of a ratio. So,
That's a great point, Bill. I appreciate that. And just back to the costing and a funding availability part is that, some funding might come later. It might be delayed, which, as you know, and so that would just need to rank a little bit differently, I guess. There's high availability, but it's 3 years down the line, and where are we going to come up with that initial cost or that initial money? So that was part of the reason of sort of separating those things out.
factoring in uncertainty
To some point. We don't really have time to go more into the ROI. I do understand what you're saying, Bill. I do think ROI is a really important component.
Yes.
Yes, because if it costs nothing or negative numbers, the town's gonna be pretty happy about it in relative terms, right? So,
It's important. We shouldn't limit. It's just a different.
it is a different thing. Yes, agreed. We're at 1:02. Are we done, Alexandra?
So if I can real quick just go to a slide on next steps, which honestly is a bit repetitive because I guess we already talked about this, but just for the sake of clarity, I'll say that thank you all for the feedback. Thank you to members of the public for the feedback as well. If there's other comments that you have that we didn't get to because we really only focused on buildings and transportation tonight, please feel free to send those to Rebecca and I, and we can collect that with all the other feedback we heard here tonight. So then we, Blue Stripe and Rebecca and I will be going back and refining the goals and strategies based off of feedback here and also further refining them to include action items. And then those will then go to our staff steering committee again for further input and review on those. And then we will come back to the again with another but fuller and draft set of the goals, strategies, and actions. I think that ultimately we're going to need to probably come back to the for what I'm going to call like a working session to get through, some of the messy middle work that happens as we refine. And then there will be, they're all public meetings, so people can participate in any of those and should, but then there'll be another one where we're doing more of a presentation of here are things actually applied, goals, strategies, actions, and applied with the framework as well. So those will be happening this fall. And then we will be presenting to the select board, not necessarily at all this level of detail, talking more about the plan itself and the process and where we're at. And I think that will be taking place on their meeting on October 16th. So I will keep you all updated on that.
Are we meeting next week?
We are. That is the plan, at least.
Is there an agenda formed already?
It
What
will
is
be
the
one
purpose?
tomorrow.
What is the purpose of next week's meeting?
I will tell you tomorrow.
I can answer that here in a sec. I just want to thank Rich for all of his time. Thanks for joining from North Carolina, Rich. I appreciate you accommodating the meeting change and appreciate all your work. So thank you.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks, everyone. Really appreciate the input and thank you for the robust discussion.
I'm gonna be remote next week. I'm gonna be in Greece.
Stop flexing. Okay. All right. We don't have time for other business today, so we're going to adjourn at 7:02. I can make a motion to adjourn the meeting, can't I now? Or to leave?
Do we have a motion?
Motion to
Motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All in favor, starting with.
Do we have a second?
Yes, I'm seconded and I say yes.
Yes.
Patty?
Yes.
Kathleen?
Yes.
Alan?
Yes.
Yes, great. Adjourned.
Thanks.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you all. Bill, just next meeting, Mothers Out Front